Hey, this is Huck. If you want to watch this top 3 asshole keep doing esports content, subscribe to Thorin's YouTube channel.
Do you know who should get wins in the Overwatch League? No, not the obvious recruitment of French FPS legend Wins, famously of Rogue in Overwatch, a captain and a leader who could turn around a dogshit dumpster fire like the Dallas Fuel, but rather wins, victories in matches in the Overwatch League. Because if so, you can bet on matches at esports pools. Requires skill and luck. Now, Overwatch has a journalism problem. Consider for a moment Overwatch as a game, a professional esports game, and where it is situated, and some of the numbers you hear thrown at you. So, when I tried searching online for overall number of players, as of late last year, late 2017, the number cited for worldwide active players was something like 35 million players. Obviously, we don't really know how many pro players overall there are. I'm not going to assign what a Google search would tell you, which would be what's now become the heavily memed quote by Activision Blizzard CEO Bobby Kotick of 75,000 pro players. There definitely is not anything around that kind of level. We know that the Overwatch League, in terms of the number of spots and the rough amount of buy-ins, remember, it's not a strict thing where everyone paid 20 million, but a rough amount, we're going to assume at least 200 million in dollars in buy-ins for the league. Massive sponsorships deals, we're told. Revenue, apparently, according to recent release reports, is above what was expected. They obviously have the Twitch deal, $90 million for a few years. But the question is, in a scene that artificially, admittedly, is that big and has numbers that they can boast like that. So we're talking light years ahead of where games like Counter-Strike and Dota and StarCraft and Warcraft and Quake were for the first 10 and a bit years of esports history. Just numbers that dwarf that. Where is the journalism scene? Where is the content creation? The League of Legends scene, when that first got rolling in 2011, 2012, immediately became vibrant. It was thriving with interviews, articles, previews, discussion threads, people doing talk shows, people having situations where they could break news, roster moves, internal league stuff, have debates about controversial topics. Where are all these people in the Overwatch scene? Now, obviously, when you address this topic, you always have to immediately point out that the split of subreddits doesn't help this topic at all. In fact, it actively propagates the problem and, to some degree, is a barrier that may not ever be able to be hurdled unless the game itself blows up to such a great degree that the smaller sub naturally then grows to a level that's bigger. But there's even problems beyond that, because when you have a subreddit split where there's the competitive Overwatch subreddit, which is pretty much the esports stuff, and then general esports stuff doesn't really make it onto the main Overwatch subreddit. Now, obviously, yes, match threads do, but that doesn't help you if you're a journalist, if you're a content creator, if you're someone outside of the Blizzard machine, and quite frankly, even some of the Blizzard content doesn't get up there. So the fact you have another subreddit, yes, puts it all in one place, but it takes it away from the main eyes and purview of the casual fans. So as a result, that 35 million players and then however many hundreds of thousands watch the stream doesn't help you anymore. You're not accessing those people when you're on the second subreddit. And so as a result, except for people who have started in Overwatch and people who are just committed to Overwatch and love the game so much, you're getting very, very few people who transition or cross over and aren't essentially endemic Overwatch journalists or content creators. Now, reasons for that are fairly obvious. There's less traffic in Overwatch compared to other games. There's less exposure to be had in Overwatch to other games. And so if people make their living or have an incentive to do work in the other games, they're either going to massively deprioritize Overwatch as a game to cover, or if they have bad enough experiences or it's hard enough to get off the ground, they're just not going to put their effort into it at all. Now, you might say, as I'm sure people will, well, who cares? We don't need those people anyway. As you'll find out in this video, you do, and they are not easily replaced with new endemic people, because the endemic people who are in the scene already don't have the same skill set, the same reach, the same base, the same tools from which to operate, don't have the same history in the game to make the same kind of a qualitative analysis. There's plenty of reasons as to why you want these established figures in the scene. There's also the factor that because you've made this hardcore little subreddit of competitive Overwatch, there is less of a dilution of the casual players and casual fans of esports. That's a key detail. There's a lot of people who are casual players and who are also casual fans. They just dip their foot in a little bit. If those people aren't making up most of the people on your subreddit, it's going to make the subreddit a lot harder for people who are content creators to engage with, and certainly to feel appreciated or in any way celebrated. Now, personally, I don't have as much of a problem with that. I've always been something of an outsider, but I know a lot of people, their motivation will wax and wane depending on how they're being treated and how they feel their work is received. So when you're in a scenario where it's not diluted with a lot of casual esports fans, the good thing about casual esports fans is, yeah, right, as hardcore fans ourselves or aficionados, yeah, we don't care about the casual esports fan, right? We think, well, I'm really into the game, I really care about it, you know, I'm going to discuss things, I'm going to argue things. But the problem is, the good thing about the casual fan is he does dilute it in the sense that he just comes in and he doesn't add too much. What he does is there's just like a few nice comments. There's people who are just willing to give people the benefit of the doubt. But do we really know that this person's biased? Or maybe they made a good point here. Or, oh, I didn't know this information. That to other people who are really hardcore fans might be like known piece of data or some simple observation. But hey, to me, this is kind of cool. Because we don't have those people in the scene, you get this scenario where it just makes the subreddit seem like it is tons of hardcore assholes whose only goal is to find something to pick at, to criticize, to say that's wrong. And as a result, it turns people off who are content creators wanting to produce content, because they produce a massive piece of content and then someone says, but this one thing was wrong. And they don't comment that, oh, but I actually did like the rest of it. Or even if I knew some of this, I agree with the way it was done. And for, you know, for a casual fan, this might be great stuff and great introductory piece so we can get more hardcore fans. They don't see that, or at least they don't post in that particular manner. A lot of these people, I have to say, are people where it's misguided. It's not even that they dislike the content creators or the content necessarily. They're people who have way too much time on their hands, sitting around on Reddit. They just want to be validated for their own opinion, or they want to feel like they have some impact on it and strike out at people, lash out at people for maybe their own frustrations in their own life or whatever's going on with their job or their mood in that moment. Okay, if you understood all this background, it'd be a lot easier to take it, but you can't know all these situations. You just see the things at face value. You don't know the username attached to it. So as a result, the impact that these comments have is far greater than sometimes the person making them even intends. Like, I've had a number of scenarios over the years and seen it where sometimes if big content creators reply to a person and say, well, that's not really true, actually, you know, I did research this thing here, or you don't know the background to this, or if you think that's the case, can you provide proof? Oftentimes those people will actually be shocked and only in that moment realize, oh wait, the content creator reads this, or they might actually respond to that. They thought they were just someone like watching a game in a bar, like, oh, bloody idiot, he needs to be taken off. And so you get this scenario where they're unduly harsh. Now, yes, I actually think Reddit is a great place for fans to discuss things, to even have outlandish or harsh or comments or memes or just make ignorant comments because you're just a fan. That's fine. I actually think Reddit's the ideal place. The problem is, it naturally will take care of itself if you have the dilution of the more casual fans, which you're not getting right now because they're on Overwatch, or they're on some sub somewhere, or they're on Twitter somewhere else, and they're not on the competitive Overwatch sub. And that is where the content creators are going to make their traffic, their exposure, get their hits, which is going to make the industry, the machinery turn, and you're going to get quality content and journalism produced. Then you've also got the fact that because there's less of the dilution, you're going to get people who are way more likely to downvote content based just on the fact they disagree with the sentiment. It's not that the writing's not good, or there aren't good points made, or that it's not well crafted, or it doesn't touch something topical. They just think, I disagree with it, so downvote. Or it's not because the quality's not good, or there's no value to having this discussion. Again, I just disagree. I don't think that's right. I think you're wrong, and the downvote. And therefore, these things chisel away at people's motivation, make people who would move into the scene think, I just won't bother, I'll stay in my own game, or I'll stay in a smaller game, but where I've got a better reception or more guaranteed my hits. There's then finally, there is the identity politics issue, which is that unfortunately, Blizzard's approach of either overlapping into that area or covering that area, or to some degree pandering to those people, has also somewhat fanned the flames of those people not only feeling welcomed, but like Overwatch is their game and Overwatch League is their esport, that these people will then attack people who are journalists, who journalists naturally are going to be people who generally have their own ideas, think a different way, have access to sources and information the general public doesn't, and therefore are going to have their own outsider opinions at times. And so if you are people who don't like people who have different opinions, that is the current authoritarian version of the left, and these are people who will silence that and who will downvote people whether they like the content or not on the basis of who the person is. Again, these are problems which aren't as big a deal in other esports games, but are hitting games like Overwatch significantly more so. You just look at the way the esports community for Overwatch has treated people thus far who would be journalists or content creators, and they've got a terrible track record. So you look at some of these people. Let's talk about Harsha, a guy who now works with the San Francisco Shock. This is a guy who was going hard as a content creator, doing videos, much in the vein of my own. He put his life and soul into this game for what? Solid year and a half, maybe closing on 2 years. He barely got traction. He would occasionally get interest. Oftentimes the hardcore fans openly mocked him, derided him, implied he didn't know anything, shouldn't comment because he's not a pro player. Generally, he didn't get a great reception, and what do you know? When he got the opportunity, he immediately upped and left and went and worked for a team where he doesn't have to take abuse. He has a guaranteed salary. He is celebrated for what he does and appreciated. And I imagine has never looked back since, even though a part of him probably still has that itch to want to create content or be part of content and wishes it was out there for him to see or others to see. Because I can tell you a secret about content creators. Oftentimes, the impetus for why we create content is because it's something we wish we could see. There's certain scenes where there's brilliant people who write content, and when they write something, I go, you know what, I'd have a slightly different take on that, but oh, great, that's awesome. Like, sometimes when they don't do that content, you think, right, I'm going to have to be the guy who writes a piece about why this player's overrated, or why this other guy's underrated, or why this team, how crazy it would have been if that player had joined. I've got to be the one to create it because no one else did. Then you look at someone like, I would say probably the best content creator in the scene right now in Overwatch is Volamel. And this is someone who a lot of people watching this video right now will barely be aware of. And if they are, maybe from coming on my show, Oversight, my talk show. Beyond that, how many of his articles have you read? How many of his historical pieces? How many of his debate appearances when he's gone on other people's content? He's been largely ignored, I have to say. This is a guy who has caused no problems in terms of drama. There has been no controversy surrounding him. He has not given off any implication or notion of what his politics are or any personal idiosyncrasies or character flaws that people might look down upon. He creates great content. He tries to celebrate the scene. He's very young in the scene, so some of it's maybe not as beefy or as in-depth as something that could be written elsewhere, but he's still grinding and honing his craft. And yet this guy's ignored. He's not celebrated as the premier journalist in the scene and the future of the scene. By the way, he's also an endemic guy who's had his rise in Overwatch. You'd think this would be the person who'd be held up as their champion, put on a pedestal. No. Then you look at someone like Slasher, who, yes, is largely just tweeting leaks and is largely just tweeting stories, not really publishing them on websites. But even so, he is treated, and by the way, he would be treated the same way if these were all published on websites. He has the curse of the investigative journalist, where people just constantly ask him, where are your sources? Show me your sources. Tell me who your source is. Prove that this is your source and that you didn't just make all of this stuff up. And as a result, people happily read his information, take his information in, then base their own judgments off his information, but then tell him that he shouldn't be allowed to have this information, that he's a disgrace, that his whole methods are incorrect, and that he's journalistically corrupt and unethical, whatever else it might be. And yet he's one of the only people supplying the scene with these leaks that they want to see. So he is not celebrated either. Jacob Wolf, one of the top esports journalists in the entire esports industry. Someone who occasionally does stuff in Overwatch, but guess what? The traffic isn't there for him. The exposure isn't there for him. If he has a story elsewhere in another game, I would tell him, just go run that one up, mate. Run up a League of Legends one or a CSGO one if you can. Go for those ones instead. Because the backlash from fanboys is going to be huge. They don't like the idea that this player's moving to another team or that a player's being kicked from a team that they don't think should be kicked. And so rather than be mad at the team that's thinking of kicking him or will kick him, they get mad at the journalist, they shoot the messenger, they downvote it, they say this is bullshit, or they go off something like, oh, but I heard on someone else's stream there's no problems with him. Guess what? People in the scene soon find out many people have different opinions, different thoughts, say different things, and have incomplete information. But people never do that. They always think the information I have is complete, therefore I can make hard and fast judgments based on it. You need more info from people behind the scenes. Then you got people like me and Richard. Okay, we are the two winners of the Esports Journalist of the Year award at the Industry Awards for the last 2 years. You'd think the scene would welcome us with open arms, right? They'd want us. No, we are constantly cast as liars, as biased, as people who are only here to cause problems, to cause drama, who just want Overwatch League to fail and somehow then are creating, you know, almost like pravda, like propaganda against it. Sometimes it's implied we're coming from other games with this agenda. Probably the most hilarious is the people who act, even though I've just told you at the beginning there's no traffic and exposure to justify justify working in the scene if you've got other interests elsewhere incentivizing you. People will imply that we only come to the scene to somehow score clicks and views and grind that money out and make a living off other people's misery, even though as I could prove it with numbers. I could do a video on literally any topic that comes in my brain right now in Counter-Strike or League of Legends, and I would make 4 to 5 times what I would make in hits and or revenue from what I would in an Overwatch video typically. Now, you think also the fact I don't even do many pieces of content in Overwatch. This is one of the reasons, again, in line with what I said before, why I look and I see a vacuum. Because since it's not my main game, it's not one that I kind of vibe with the most, I'd love to read more content from other people. I'd love it if Harsher was still around, if Kirby was still here, if we had Sideshow making all his great content. If all these people are available, they aren't though. And so as a result, I've been in scenarios where even though I am not an investigative journalist, it's something I've very rarely ever done. It was not the side of journalism I worked in. I'm a historian. I'm someone who likes historical context and to write up either articles which analyze history or opinion pieces. That's my bag. But there have been times where I've had stories brought to me, and what happens is in other games, in League of Legends, in Quake, in Counter-Strike, or whatever, if someone brings a story to me, they're like, oh, there's player abuse going on, or there's some really dodgy stuff going on with the league, I tend to pass it to someone else that I think is a good investigative journalist who does that sort of thing, to a Richard, to someone else in the scene. I pass the story along to them, they run the story up, if they think it's worth doing, they do it. In Overwatch, I've ended up doing a bunch of videos that, yes, were Thorin's thoughts because I didn't want to package them as these are all just pure facts. I wanted to give commentary because that's my strength largely. But I did investigative hybrid pieces in my Thorin's Thoughts series in Overwatch, 3 or 4 already, purely because people in the industry came to me. They sought me out and said, I know you're someone who has authority behind your voice, and you have a track record, and you have an audience and a viewer base who you can get this information out to, and people will listen if you speak. So here's what's going on with me. Here's what's going on with my team. Here's some disturbing things I've heard elsewhere in the scene that you could run up. Here's some abuses of power to look into. And I've said to them, you know, I could pass you off to these people, and either the other people in the rest of the esports industry just say, there's not worth my time and effort and the hassle to run this story up and be downvoted. Or these people have just said, no, it's got to be you who does it. I've tried going to other people. I can't get anyone to take my story. And these are all industry people. So I've said, okay, you know what? This is clearly an important issue. You're right. Someone should do it. And I've gone and done it myself. Now, what have I gotten in exchange for that? All the above that I mentioned. Told that you're biased, you're just doing it for clicks, you're just here to be negative and to drag the game down, you've been kicked out of other scenes. Absolutely not the case, by the way. I make more from some other individual games than Overwatch League players make in a year. So the notion that I'm doing it just for clicks is absolutely ludicrous. Then you think of someone like Richard. All that is laid upon him is, first of all, he doesn't get past the identity politics barrier. There are people who are like, he threw a 7-year-old Dota pro off the steel cage at Hell in the Cell 1997 and then hit him with a trash can, killing him, and therefore he should never work in the scene. Or they just start listing off labels: transsexual, transphobic, racist, bigot, and then it's on him somehow to prove he's not these things. So he doesn't get past the barrier there. People already downvote his work. Then there's the people who are just esports people. They're not nutters like that. And then they start just going with pure negativity claims. Oh, he's just here to drag the scene down, or he just hates Overwatch, or he hates Blizzard. They never think, would he have good reasons to do so? If he's someone, again, incentivized in other scenes, celebrated in other scenes for creating content, why wouldn't he just put his efforts into those rather than do things in Overwatch? Because there's an impetus behind it. He's seen a track record of behavior from people. He's seen what happens when you allow abuses of power. He knows that this is a scene that can have an impact on the rest of esports if it's fucked up, if it's done in an irresponsible manner and it's mishandled. This is someone who largely, his remit and MO is to protect the esports scene and has been for over a decade. He has seen what Blizzard had done elsewhere when they set up WCS, crushing endemic aspects of the scene, blocking tournaments elsewhere if they don't have official approval from Blizzard, not allowing tournaments to run head-to-head with Blizzard tournaments, therefore making the scene smaller in StarCraft 2, blocking certain talent from working in games because of their history of criticizing Blizzard. We've already seen in Overwatch League bans that have no consistency to them, fines that have no consistency to them, people being punished on things that aren't even ethical or moral crimes or legal crimes, just at the whims of trying to pander to certain parts of the community and trying to punish someone because something was seen to be worse than it was and not taking a reasonable, appropriate course to punishment. You need people to offset these things. And there's a reason why someone would then be very skeptical of things that Blizzard does. You think of some of the other people in the scene. Okay, I think the only person who really got a pass and decent traffic was probably Sideshow, right? Even so, he didn't get much traffic. I went and looked this up, and I found actually I had a rosier memory, a nostalgic memory of Sideshow's success than actually his videos showed. His videos, yes, some of them would get 10,000, 20,000 hits. Most of them, go and look, are at 1,000 to 2,000 views. Now, even if his channel was at a big level and he monetized that correctly and he had fans who either had YouTube Red or were from the right regions, 1,000 to 2,000 views for someone like him on those videos is probably $1. He makes $1 for one of those videos. So that does not in any way incentivize him to spend even 1 hour making those videos. That's below minimum wage. Now, I can tell you, in other games, no matter what people say about demonetization and YouTube ad revenue going down, the adpocalypse, I make significantly more than that per hour. Many, many magnitudes more than that per hour of what it takes me to do a video. Someone like Sideshow, it wasn't justified to stay doing content. So guess what? He went and became one of the best analysts. But in becoming one of the best analysts, he is now precluded from doing certain, saying certain things, whether or not officially, just in terms of the relationships he's now a part of and the fact that you don't go and talk direct shit against friends and partners of yours, especially if there's other people could do it and not have the same repercussions. So you don't have, again, what could have been, along with Volamel, along with Harsha, one of the best content creators esports has ever seen. Never mind just the Overwatch scene, especially because Sideshow has that background going back into TF2 and therefore even had a special connection to some of the players and kind of an understanding of the meta, which I think's always been ahead of other people's. And as a result, he would have been a fantastic content creator. You don't have someone who can just come in and replace him. Then you look at some of the other talents. Now, you might think I've listed off all the names already. No, there are people that some of you have probably never heard of who I'm about to say. So the number one example would be a guy called Elbion, who was, I found him because he was writing for .esports, where I write about esports. And this is a guy who, from very early on in Overwatch, was incredibly productive. Even with very little traffic, very little ad revenue, probably making very little money from it. He was doing previews. He was doing historical pieces. He was doing predictive pieces. He was doing meta-related analysis. He was doing interviews. He was doing content that would try to build up the content creation scene around Overwatch. He was doing all this stuff, and he got next to no traction. It wasn't even that people just hated him or thought he just had nothing to say. People didn't post his work to Reddit. People didn't upvote it when it was Reddit. People didn't comment on it when it was on Reddit. He was just ignored. And again, this is someone who, in the beginning, already was providing immense value, but beyond that, could have provided even more and been primarily situated to be a key figure in the Overwatch scene. As far as I know, he doesn't even do very much content anymore. Just eventually, you can only do so many pieces and get nothing back in return before you go, this doesn't work, I'm going to go do something else with my time, even if that's not esports or esports journalism. There are numerous talents, even in this list here, who were mistreated or weren't celebrated, who as a result have just moved on. So the broadcast team, teams in the Overwatch League, they've hired up people like Sideshow, Harsha, Bren, Kirby. These people just aren't around anymore. I mean, me and Monte Cristo do our talk show largely because we like doing a talk show and we've always thought it's important for the community. We're not incentivized to do that. If anything, it probably actually endangers Monty's career and the career relationships at times with some of the criticism and some of the comments that I will make that I'm entirely within my own prerogative to make, but it's difficult for someone like him to be associated with. If we didn't do our show, how many shows would there be out there? How well watched would they be? There's shows out there, they have very low viewership. They don't get the same pop. Why? They don't have the same big names. They don't have the same viewer base. They don't have the same ability to distribute. They don't have the same network and connections, do they? So again, you can't just replace these people. If I just stop doing Oversight tomorrow, there goes one of the biggest shows that can get all the big players and that can get big topics discussed and get out there into the wider world and even bring in fans from other games to watch that show who are all familiar with that duo and understand kind of our patois, as it were, our camaraderie, our rapport. So here's the question I would ask people, because I often see when all these comments are made, this ignoring of journalists because they think, they're just shit lubes, they've just started, what do they know about pro players? Or, the guy's so biased, he's just doing it for clicks. Here's what I'd ask you. Give me the counterexamples. Where are the great content creators and journalists, investigative journalists and content creators and historians who you think are unbiased, who are doing a great job and whose content's doing really well on the sub? Where are they? They don't exist. Where are the great content creators that you upvote, that you celebrate, that you love what they do and you think they do a great job of chronicling the history? What, is everyone just shit, are they? I can tell you as someone with a lot of experience in esports journalism, they're not. There's some fabulous talent, and there especially were some fabulous talent in the Overwatch scene, especially for a burgeoning game. It took other games many, many years to build up that kind of level of person. Then, and talent. Where are the independent individuals, journalists, analysts, interviewers, who can criticize, who can expose, who can talk about the things that other people can't, either implicitly or by virtue of certain relationships and conflicts of interest? Where are these people? Barely exist. And if they are, not celebrated, somewhat ignored. As a result of this vacuum, Overwatch is missing many things. It's missing more original reporting. People breaking stories on industry matters. If it wasn't for Richard Lewis, none of you would have the Overwatch League rulebook. You wouldn't even know what the rules are. They could tell you this person's broken a rule, and as a result, he's going to get this punishment. You wouldn't be able to verify that there was a rule, and that it was a rule before he did the thing. I've seen rules are applied retroactively. Especially happened in League of Legends. It happened also in Blizzard games. You wouldn't know that there was a specific rule. You could check the wording of it, see if it was fair. Then you could check if it had any accompanying punishment, and if they went too far with that. You wouldn't have any of this information. You won't have anyone fact-checking or providing checks and balances against things in PR statements like, oh, the revenue's going up. Is it? Has anyone verified that, have they? Because if not, that's like almost insider trading, just using PR that you then make things shoot up. People buy in for more, but no one ever checked if it was real. You want to know if league success is real, if revenue is real, if relationships between the league and the teams are good, if players are being treated well. You need to check on abuses of power, and that is what journalists are there for. That is one of the primary things they're there for. Yes, they're there also to celebrate the scene, chronicle it, archive it, provide analysis, context, but a key thing they do is they act as checks and balances against abuse of power in sentencing, in punishments, in the way things are dealt with, in people writing the rules behind the scenes without you knowing and then saying that they always existed. The top content creators are not simply pieces that you can say, right, well, that guy left, so just plug in a new guy and it'll work. It doesn't work that way, in the same way it wouldn't with players. If someone like Fletter, Jonak, Sabielby just retired tomorrow, you could put in a very good player who could maybe be like 80% as good, but it wouldn't be Jonak. It wouldn't be Sabielby. It wouldn't be Fletter. Not only could they not do these things, they also wouldn't have the same history, the same impact on you as a player, the same name value. You can't just plug and play with these people. You can't be replaced in the same way. And it definitely can't be done by teams. Now, if teams are being bought for $20 million and massive bankrolls of salaries and all the rest of it, you'd think, right, they'd have a full content team. They're producing not just reality shows. They do all the interviews. They do their own pieces. They won't, and they can't. Not only do they not have the time, they don't have enough people logistically to do it. They're also in a situation where, in terms of content, I'll tell you what teams do. They go and get their own content creators, which tend to be people for free, either intern level people or beginning content creators, and they pay those people. And guess what? Because they're beginners or new or just not good, they don't make good content. They don't make content of the same level as a big name content creator who's made their name and their career off creating great content or content that people like and is popular. Now, I have to say, a big issue here, as I alluded to with the thought experiment of where are these other content creators that are all the positives that people would espouse but can't be found. A problem here is people misunderstanding or misinterpreting skepticism towards the Overwatch League, or trying to be someone who's critical of it or who exposes shadiness within the scene. Because the skepticism of Overwatch League as a concept and as a practical day-to-day operation is absolutely justified. The notion that it has already proven wrong any skepticism is ludicrous. This is still to this day massively high-stakes gambling, which can also have an impact on other esports and esports as a whole, and it is far from home or safe right now. Do people really believe this straw man that people who were skeptical of the Overwatch League thought that a week into the Overwatch League, Blizzard would say, you know what, we're done fucked up, viewing figures aren't as high as we wanted, revenue isn't as high as we wanted, teams aren't playing great games, this isn't such a great esports league, we're going to shut it down after week one. No. Part of the pitch to those teams was, we guarantee this will last years. There will be multiple seasons. We will ensure you make a certain level of revenue. So teams aren't going to, as a result, cry out, "What? Where are our revenues? This is going really badly." Even if that was the case initially, because they're going to give more time, because Blizzard is the teat that they are feeding from, if not from outside sponsorships and revenue made elsewhere. So as a result, this is far from a done deal. We aren't even 5% into the Overwatch story yet in terms of if it's going to fail or not, or if it's reached some kind of longevity where it's outlasted, it's outrun its initial problems, which the skepticism suggested could be the case. There are many things, and they must be proven. It's not the other way that someone has to prove that it will fail. No. It must prove that it will succeed. That is the burden of proof, and there is far from the evidence to suggest it will right now in terms of viewership, in terms of verifiable numbers, in terms of long-term success of being able to get another Twitch deal, being able to get outside sponsorship, being able to make geolocation work, being able to make the future league where the future seasons are going to be where you go around the world and play and become decentralized, not just all in one place like an LCS. That's where you are going to have magnitudes more things to prove, and the test is far from finished, and the experiment has not been shown to be a success yet. Then you've got the backlash of newer fans. These are a lot of the people who are against the skepticism because they love Overwatch. The Overwatch League started. It's getting some viewing figures. It's a great league to watch. It's very entertaining. Some of the games, some great players there, and they think, wow, why be critical? This is the classic syndrome, which I have seen in every new esports title, particularly ones that don't have a history, because essentially Overwatch goes back to Team Fortress. It doesn't go back to a mobile like League of Legends. It doesn't go back to an FPS like Counter-Strike. It's too different, and therefore the crossover fans, there are a lot of new fans. And the new fans in all new games always hate people saying other games were better or other elements of other scenes were better. They just don't want to believe it, and so they're resistant to that information. They also don't understand people have a background and a track record and the industry understanding to be able to make such statements. They think it's just blind hating. It's someone who doesn't like Overwatch just saying Overwatch is bad. They also, because they're new fans, it's like this principle, okay? I've always thought, isn't it ridiculous, right, that you get the 16-year-old who becomes a goth or becomes into punk music, and they will tell you that they are the most hardcore fan of punk or goth music. But the problem is, based on how long they've been alive, if they started a reasonable time, 14 or 15, getting into that music, they haven't even gone through the full collection of the main, most obvious artists there. They might not even have heard 10 albums by the Ramones. Yet they might have a Ramones t-shirt and say, I love the Ramones. They've heard the first album. They actually are putting on a face of being hardcore because it's so important to their identity as a specific fan of this type of music to show that they're so hardcore, and part of that involves attacking others and doing purity tests. This is what new esports fans do. They want to show that they're hardcore Overwatch fans. And so first of all, anyone who's casual, fuck them. And anyone from another game, you just don't know enough about this game or this scene, and they have to show that they're the most hardcore. And yet, funnily enough, most of the Overwatch League fans I've seen and interacted with are brand new to the Overwatch League. They don't even know Overwatch before the Overwatch League. They think Contenders is some old school shit. They don't know about Apex. They don't know about the MLGs and the ESL tournament back in the day. They haven't watched any of this shit. Then you have people who, because they don't know the background of some of the people they're talking about, just assume bad faith on the part of the person saying skeptical things or criticizing or exposing something, or assume they're a bad actor sent to sow dissent or to give dishonest or disingenuous opinions. Pretty condescending stuff when you're brand new to the scene. You don't know the game, you don't know the industry, and you don't know the history of the people involved and their track records. As a result, this kind of backlash, while it's to be expected, I've certainly come to expect it, I knew this would be the case, it puts people off who are old school or who in other scenes are celebrated or respected. It makes them think, why the fuck would I go into this new game and have everyone question everything I do, tell them all my work's shit and downvote it and just post hateful shit about me? I'll just stick in my own game, shall I? This is actually the only game I can think of that's been as bad as this, because I have to say, when I came into League of Legends, there was some of this, but it wasn't as bad. Actually, because I did interviews and stuff, people were loving it. They were celebrating it. They were saying, oh, this is great. So please come and do this. We need more of this. I haven't seen that in Overwatch. In fact, Overwatch reminds me more of in StarCraft, anyone who had a connection to StarCraft Brood War, the predecessor, because that was known to be the pinnacle of RTS. If you ever mentioned some criticism of StarCraft 2, it's because you just like Brood War and you were hating on StarCraft 2. Oh, you're just hating on a new game. Give it time. Oh, stop being skeptical. Don't you want the game to get big? Don't you believe in the developer? Never minding that these people might know the developer, might know the people involved, might know track records, patterns of how the scene emerges and where pitfalls are already coming up ahead. But no, we're supposed to put blind faith into the scene. Then you couple all of that with the low traffic, with the lack of exposure, and you're going to turn people off. They're only going to come in when it's something really important to them, which transcends traffic. That's what often happens with people like Richard when they do a video, people like me when I've done it. We're not doing it because it's just everyday content that in a normal game we would create that celebrates the game, analyzes the game, all the rest of it, does interviews with people. No, we're only coming in when it's really important that, look, you know what, traffic and exposure be damned. This must be criticized. This must be talked about. Someone has to address this. Someone has to expose this. This must be stopped. That's the only time you get us to come in. So guess what? Yes, it's only negative stuff. It's only critical stuff. It's only things that are not the ideal thing to hear about that's going to make everyone feel happy and great and a feel-good story. Yeah, I'm afraid that's the way it is. And part of it's your own fault. It's a vicious cycle. You also need people who don't have a direct connection to Overwatch and don't make their money from Overwatch directly in order to be able to provide certain kinds of criticism that will come off as negative in contrast to what is there already. Because there is criticism that people on the broadcast can't provide. Like, for example, the Shanghai Dragons are a fucking terrible team. And that has barely been touched upon properly. Instead, the whole storyline and narrative is, when will they get their first win? Oh, aren't they doing a good job in light of the context of their circumstances? Oh, aren't they battling and they came so close in that 3-2? You don't have people really showing the world that, you know what, there's great teams in the Overwatch League. They are not. This is unacceptable. For the buy-in, what does it say about the league that you can never win a match? What does it say about how terrible it is? Have you had any articles written about why they haven't got all the best Chinese players? No, because guess what? People on broadcast can't really go into that stuff. They can't reveal it. You need someone independent who never has to go to China and worry about the Chinese scene threatening them or their livelihood. You need someone who can report on that if you want to have the inside info on why that team's bad. Because if you made a team with the best Chinese players, I'm telling you right now, they'd be top half of the table. Then you look at, for example, Geguri, the female player the Korean player who's been brought over to play on the Shanghai Dragons. Now, in the context of the Shanghai Dragons, she's doing a good job. She's playing her heart out. She's doing her best. She seems like a pretty good teammate. But I have to say, the overwhelming praise is disproportionate to how well she is playing in the context of the situation she is playing in. And I have to say, I'm very concerned that in the future, if she has an individual slump, if she plays badly, if she is an element in the team that, whether from her own fault or not, is part of why they're losing in the future, I don't think it will be properly highlighted. I don't think it will be criticized properly because of the fact she is someone who is a female, and people are so scared of being called misogynists and have allowed the mainstream media and mainstream gaming press to paint Overwatch as such, and Blizzard have pandered to the identity politics crowd that people won't allow criticism of her. Well, that now makes that sexist. Now men are going to be criticized in a way that she will not be. And anyone who now goes, oh, maybe everyone should just be celebrated and not criticized. That's not the way the world works. And the only way you can enforce a world in which no one can criticize is to basically some form of authoritarianism or totalitarianism. People only do it when the gun, essentially a bullet, a prison, or absolute social outcast, pariah status is what will force you not to say these things. And that's how you can limit it to a very small few underground sect of dissidents saying these things. Which, funnily enough, would look a bit like if people like me and Richard and others were available now, Monte Cristo, who were then getting a lot of backlash for making those criticisms. Yeah, it's weird that. Because when you don't have a lot of people able to do it, the few that do it don't get celebrated. Wow, they stand out, they're daring to say it. People go, why are you the only one saying it? And other people's silence becomes complicit in why you get the criticism. Then you look at a team like Dallas Fuel. Yes, people certainly have reveled in all the problems in that team, all the rest of it, but they still believe, oh, no, they're playing so much better, aren't they, in all these fucking losses. People still act like it's acceptable for that team to have been this bad and that badly managed and that terribly run inside the team, and some of the behavior of the players totally unacceptable, and the coaching staff all over the place. Florida Mayhem, I think, is one that they every day they get up, they should go and fucking pray to a picture of Hastro that he fucked up the Dallas Fuel in part with other people. Almost everyone in that scenario fucked up. They should pray to him every day, because they're the ones who should be in the crossfire. They're the ones who it took getting Sire player to even look like you had a chance at winning some matches, and even him hard carrying can't win you matches because the rest of the team's setup, due to how it was managed and put together and coached, was so poorly done that you just can't win games. This is a fucking terrible team. It's a disgrace that you have 3 teams like this in the league, but they get to slip under the radar because I want to train wreck the Dallas Fuelers in terms of personalities and drama and how utterly dogshit the Shanghai Dragons are at ever winning any games. Then you need people to criticize ownership of these teams. Did they fuck up in buying them, or entrusting a certain person, or not giving enough salary and not enough budget to someone to buy a proper team, and therefore it's not even the fault of the players and the coaching staff? You don't get to know that if you only listen to the broadcast. You need criticism of the league, how shit some of the format is, how stupid some of the aspects are. Like, you don't play every team, yet you're getting judged in terms of going to the playoffs based on what you do overall. The fact you're in different divisions and that affects the seeding, but no one ever thought this through in the beginning because we couldn't know how good the teams are. The rules at times are sloppily applied or just way too vague, and you could drive a fucking truck through them in terms of the loopholes and the way that the league themselves can manipulate them as and when they see fit. Criticism of the game. Yes, they can criticize balance elements, but you can't as strongly and vocally criticize if you're part of the broadcast, if you're part of the mechanism, part of the trickle-down industry of Overwatch and the Overwatch League. You can't criticize the game in the same way, and whether or not they're going down a wrong path and something's really bad for the game and is ruining it because on a casual level it's too strong, or on a pro level it's too strong and too weak on a casual level. The notion that it's only negativity that's causing people to be skeptical and to make these, to create content that people don't like, is nonsense. I mean, who in the scene is going to protect the Overwatch and the esports scene from smears from outside? When these people come in from the gaming press and they say it's all sexist, it's all racist, despite the fact these scenes in this game have a better track record and provably less barriers in the way, in some cases no barriers, to sexism, as I pointed out in a video, compared to major sports that never get those criticisms. No one says, where are the women in the NFL? Now, I know a lot of you people watching this video would go, well, that's just logical. Why would you want women in the NFL? They're not going to be as strong. They're going to get beaten up. There are the same people who make those claims on their same site will have an article written saying there are no biological differences between men and women. And in fact, you can be any gender you please. These two things don't add up. Why don't their criticisms then follow to why the NHL doesn't have women hockey players at the top level? Doesn't follow, right? Because there's an agenda here. So who's going to protect the scene from those sorts of people, those sorts of smears, which at the end of the day also always are accompanied by the notion that it's not just even the league or the sport. It's widespread. Overwatch gamers are sexist, are racist, are bigots, are xenophobes, whatever it might be. This is the way it's presented, are unwelcoming. This is one of the most welcoming scenes you will ever get for any big sports competitive type discipline, quite frankly. Who's going to protect you from that? If you wanted someone, and someone said, right, there's going to be one huge threat, like aliens coming to Earth, right? And it's going to unite the whole scene, and we have to pick one champion who's going to battle against all the forces of the mainstream and the gaming press and people outside, and we're going to battle on behalf of gamers, on behalf of Overwatch gamers, on behalf of people who are fans of Overwatch esports. You know who the number one person you would pick would be? It would be Richard Lewis. This is someone with a track record of doing exactly that, who can't be bought, who has numerous times turned down money, put his own career in danger, had to move jobs, had to change into different games at times due to what he's faced, due to exposing corruption, battling against liars, scumbags, people he knows the history of that you might not, people he has inside information on, you might not. This is the person you would turn to no matter what you think of him as a person. Think about, I'll give you a child's example for people who don't have any sort of history in journalism or politics to understand this. Think about in comics when the X-Men are doing their day-to-day adventures, right? Who's one of their main villains? Oh, it's Magneto, isn't it? He's one of the main ones because he has an authoritarian, violent streak in him where he is against humans. And even though X-Men are persecuted by humans, they still want to have an alliance with humans and find peace. But you know what? When a bigger threat comes along that could end the whole universe, since Magneto wants to live in the universe, sometimes he will join forces as against someone like an Apocalypse with the X-Men to battle that force for the greater good. In the DC universe, if you wanted a human who could help battle and save someone like Superman, who has superhuman powers but his own flaws, you would want someone like the smartest human in the world, Lex Luthor, with massive resources at his fingertips and a long history of knowing how to get shit done to, for that moment, join forces and battle back. This is the stupidest element of trying to make these people pariahs or tell them they're unwelcome in your scene. Because if we don't have journalism like this, you're going to end up in a very, very dark timeline in the future, if not already, where everything is Blizzard sanctioned and approved. People, gamers, esports fans are attacked regularly by the mainstream with no counterbalance, with no checks, with no one setting the record straight. They're smeared as racists, as sexists, generally as bigots. They're painted, if not that, as losers who are Cheeto dust-covered virgins living in their mother's basement, jerking off to anime, some of which may be true for some of us, but it's certainly not the case for everyone, and is obviously an unreasonable way to represent everyone overall. Where will be the content celebrating the great teams, criticizing the bad teams, making sure there's on-point analysis, being someone who can say things that you can't say on broadcast or in a team or in the league or if you make your money from the Overwatch scene? Who's going to break those stories? No one. And you'll end up in a much worse world for it. This video was made possible by Dean Tanglis, Sanity, Gman, Andreas, Snazore, Westerlund, Alex Adams, Mikkel Hansen, Jerky's Minion, Anthony, Bash, Daniel Yordanov, Yordan Tsenkov, TTMXMP, VeXii, HawpT, Travis T. Greb. Just like my man, A lot of people think you can't tell me nothing, but I've graduated from that mindset. And now it is possible to have influence over some of the people I have on my shows, some of the topics I cover, to ask me questions directly and get exclusive teasers for upcoming projects I'm working on. Unlock the code to the streets and join the Scrilluminati today at the Patreon link below.